Hi guys, and welcome to this chapter of business model and risks, which is a new reading which has been added by the CFA curriculum for the 2023 syllabus. I really particularly like this reading because it speaks about a lot of content which probably as an analyst you should be knowing on how different businesses work. Because at the end, if we are talking about investment, whether it's private equity or whether it's public equity, the whole idea of interpreting the business seems to be a challenge with a lot of students, right? Because they do not understand the business side of it, but they do understand the finance side of it, right? So let's first get started with understanding what is the learning outcome statements which have been mentioned here, and then we start taking one at a time and try to knock this off for this preparation that you are preparing for, right? So let's look at the three readings, or you can say a three learning outcome statements which are mentioned out here. Is first to understand, describe key features and types of business models. All right. So second is describe expected relation between a company's external environment, business model, and financing needs. It's more of trying to understand how a business operates under various conditions like competition, you know, regulatory environment is what the second LOS is trying to target. Okay. Now, the third LOS, which is mentioned out here, is explain and classify types of business and financial risks for a company. Okay, so this is a very fairly easy one to understand and will eventually get discovered in other readings as well. All right, so let's not waste any more time and let's get with the first LOS because this is what is going to take the maximum amount of time. Okay, so let's first understand what are the key features of a business model. What do we mean by when we say that show me a business model, right? So in essence, what we are saying is you want to be able to talk about who's your customer, right? Finally, about the product, who's going to use the product. What is the problem that you're solving? Although it's written here, business proposition for them, what it actually means is what is the problem that you're trying to solve for the customer. All right. And the third is who are the stakeholders in this, entire business environment, including your suppliers and the assets that you're using. For example, if you were talking about an iPhone, right? So in this case, the suppliers are a big aspect of the business because the supplying comes from Taiwan, right? The chips come from Taiwan. Some of the components come from Europe. Some components are made in America as well, right? So all these are the aspects of business model. And finally, why the business should survive. And that's what the logic is, right? So if you're talking about iPhone, then you can talk about privacy. You can also talk about the fact that there's reliability. You can also talk about the quality of the phone in terms of its components, right? And you can also talk about its lineage, right? So those are, it's basically a business plan which is summarized in a very easy to understand language is what a business model is, right? At least at the summary level. Okay. Now let's go further and try to understand what do we mean by these terms. Okay. So when we are saying customers, you can try to speak about a customer, who's your customer, also in terms of geography. Okay, my customers are from America or my customers are from Asia Pacific. And you can also speak about segment or age in terms of who your customers are. Now, this is obviously a very, very, bird's eye view of things, right? However, when you're actually looking at a customer in the real business sense, you want to dig down further in understanding who's your actual customers, right? So if you were to speak about iPhone, you might say that, okay, in terms of geography, you've got people buying iPhone from almost all the countries, right? And you might say that, okay, the segment which buys iPhone generally is between 30 to 40. I'm just making things up, right? And you might also say that these are the people who have an annual income of more than $60,000, right? So I'm just making things up, right? So this is my customer. So you should be able to create a virtual, you can say a persona of who your actual customer is in terms of their features. Right? Now, what is the solution that you're trying to provide? Right? And it has to solve a problem. If a business model is not solving a problem, then it shouldn't even exist. Right? Sometimes the problem might be something that people are not ready to pay for, or sometimes the solution are too many, right? Or sometimes cheaper solution versus an expensive solution has no differentiation, right? So a lot of time analysts have spent time thinking that does the company provide the solution in the best possible way, and will it actually survive? And where is how do you distribute the solution? Is it physical? Is it channel? Is it online? How is it going to be? Right. So this is how you can say probably the extra explanation of what customers, where and solutions, what they provide can be explained. Right. Let's move further and let's try to discuss a case study. Okay. So this is Apple's business models they've presented themselves. And this was presented in this website called as 4-week MBA. All right. So now, if you see out here, if you look at in terms of the products, they have many solutions. Right. In that, you can clearly see that the phone business is the biggest contributor, whereas the company actually started off with providing personal computers, ended up making chunk of their revenue only through phones. And followed after that are the accessories, right? So you can see that accessories out here is about 10 to 15%, and then a lot of business actually is coming from services, right? And that's primarily because iPhone always makes a lot of margin in their service business as well, probably more margin than they make it in their normal business, right? And followed by, of course, the wearables. Then you've got your iPad, and then finally the business which it started for, which was the personal computer, is actually just 9.62%. Right now, if you look at the customers, who is the customer? So customers are from Americas, Europe, Japan, China, and also Asia Pacific, right? South Asia Pacific, right? And if you see how do they sell? So you can see out here 36% is direct sales, because iPhone also does direct sales from their owned you can say channels in terms of their shops, as well as online, and also through indirect channels like Amazon and various other websites, and also a lot of distributors who are authorized distributors who sell on behalf of Apple. All right. So that's how, what do we mean in terms of very short explanation on what exactly do we mean by a business model. Right. Let's move further in discussing the channel assets. Okay. So what do we mean by channel assets? I felt sometimes the CFA curriculum has tried to complicate things beyond what is actually required. So, it's still okay to discuss this, but in terms of channel, we are talking about how do we get the product to the customer and who are the stakeholders in the process, right? So what they've tried to do is they've tried to bifurcate this in terms of function, assets, and firms. So in terms of function, they're saying selling and marketing function. So what do we use in selling and marketing? It might be, maybe we are using Google, or maybe you're using Facebook. For order processing and MIS function, which services are we using? For example, in India, smaller businesses would be using services of Zoho, right? In terms of assets, for the distribution of the product, what kind of warehouses are we using? What retail store do we have, right? What are the digital assets in terms of website? Because that's also a form of store. The only thing is just an online store. Then you've got your firms who are working on behalf of you to sell the product, right? So that would include retailers, wholesaler, agents, and also franchises, which are nothing but your subsidiary distribution channels. The only thing is that they would also have a say in terms of how the product is getting sold. The only thing is product is provided by you. They just do the selling part and maintaining your brand image and whatever you want to call it, right? So McDonald's is an example, CCD is an example, Starbucks is an example. So there are many franchisee businesses. Domino's, for that matter, is a franchisee business, right? So all those are channel assets. Let's move further in terms of the traditional channel strategy. Now, this is only traditional. It's not really necessary that every firm has to follow the same process. So if we say that first there's a manufacturer who will manufacture the goods, then he will provide this to the wholesaler. Then the wholesaler will will have a lot of retailers under him, basis region, and then it finally reaches the customer, right? So, for example, this might be very true in terms of FMCG products or construction products like cement, that you would have the same structure of a manufacturer, or even in case of medicines for that matter, right? So this has been going on since a lot of time in terms of the manufacturer has this master distributor called as the wholesaler. In fact, after wholesaler, you might also have something called as a distributor, okay, who's like a master retailer who would also manage a lot of retailers, right? So the margins keep on changing, right? So if the wholesaler gets the product for 100, right, the retailer might sell it for 110, making a 10% cut on the commission, right? 10%, right? So that's how the traditional channel strategies have been in place. In fact, even in the computer business, a lot of companies like IBM used to follow the same principle, but there have been instances where innovation has helped in directly bypassing this and directly going to the customer. In fact, iPhone, when it's doing direct sales, it's actually skipping all of this and directly going to the customer. And here is what the example specifically for that. So this is how, this is the old method in which the computer assembling used to go on, right? So there's the PC manufacturer. So you've got your component manufacturer who supply the components to the PC manufacturers, for example, let's say IBM, right? Now, what is happening is now the components are going to the distributor reseller who will assemble and then give it to the customer. Okay. So now what happens is, as we go through each level of distribution, the price of the product is obviously going to increase. And that finally makes the product a little more uncompetitive, right? And also becomes a big barrier for any new entrant to actually do well in the business. That is where what Dell did, right? In fact, Dell is a fantastic case study in a lot of business schools in which innovation can, innovation just does not have to happen in the product itself. It can also happen in a lot of other aspects like distribution for that matter, right? So what Dell did, in fact, it came out of a hostel dorm room in which what they thought is what, we could just assemble. I mean, the whole concept of assembling and making a new computer was actually created by Dell itself, right? So, it worked well for a lot of years, but then, the markup of the prices kept on increasing as they were trying to build in the whole wholesaler, retailer segment, or the whole chain of value chain of creating this customer finally to the customer, right? So what they came up with an idea is that what if we could directly get the product to the customer itself and remove all the middlemen in the process. In fact, a lot of businesses nowadays of discount, you can say marketing is also related with the same concept, right? It's the likes of Walmart, or, in India, you could also talk about DMart, are all examples of skipping the wholesaler altogether, right? So the wholesaler is also the retailer, right? In fact, if you look at the Adani business example as well, what they have done is they have done this backward integration. So a lot of people were questioning on the fact that why did the business, acquire a cement business, right? It really didn't make any sense. But if you look at it, the reason for them to acquire the cement business, because they were also involved in a lot of construction and a lot of port development businesses. Now, and also when they're buying cement from the wholesaler or from the manufacturer, obviously the cost is a little higher than what it would have been if it was building itself. So what they did is they did a backward integration and they bought the cement business itself. Now what has happened is, since they are manufacturing cement by themselves and they're using it by themselves, and plus now they are selling the product directly to the customer, the cement at the rate at which they are selling is pretty cheap, right? So that's how a lot of strategy also can come in China. I'm just giving examples so that you get a little more perspective to make this entire reading a little more interesting. Okay, now this is what happened in terms of revenue. Okay, so the Dell strategy worked, and this is what happened to their days of inventory. See, so if you see, this is 94, the inventories are still high, and then they came up with the direct getting the product on time to the customer without maintaining a large inventory. Look at how their days of inventory has dropped significantly, right? From almost, you can say, the highest of 35 or 36 days all the way up to 6 days, just by coming up with a new strategy of getting the customer directly the product, right? So let's move further in understanding a pricing strategy. Now there are various ways of pricing a product. Okay, it's not just always looking at the competition, right? Generally, a business will try to decide whether they want to play premium or they want to be the cheapest one in the market, and both are fine, right? For example, you can see that in the automobile business, right? uh, Tesla's, I mean, at least the new vehicles that they're coming up with is as good or as pricey as probably the luxury cars. But they don't really care whether they are selling it expensive or not, because they want to be premium. The only thing what they are focusing is on the quality. So they want to play the premium game, right? So is, for example, BMW or even Mercedes for that matter, right? And maybe also the case for Volvo. So they are all premium players, but not all are premium players. For example, if you look at the likes of businesses like Kia, or if you look at businesses like Hyundai, or you look at businesses like Suzuki, they've been more towards value. Okay, so that's where the value strategy comes. This is where Tesla would lie. This is where Suzuki or Kia would like in giving more value for the same price, right? Then there's another kind of pricing strategy. It's actually not pricing strategy, it's just an outcome. Is when you don't have any say on the price. Because, for example, you are in the mining business, right? Now you might mine as much as you want. You might mine well. You might mine well better than the other person or the other business. But finally, your price is going to be decided on the international markets, right? So, for example, if you're talking about lead is led by international prices. If you're talking about soybean is led by international prices. Gold, silver, any zinc for that matter, and copper as well. So here you are basically a price taker, right? And price setters are those companies who actually set prices based on their differentiation, and they will command the price in the market, right? For example, you could fairly call iPhone as a price setter and not a price taker. You could definitely call an MI phone as a price taker, because it also depends upon how other businesses similar to MI or Redmi for that matter is selling at, right? So that's how the price differentiation happens, right? Now let's try to understand few more strategies, detailed strategies on pricing, all right? So if you're saying in terms of how do I price, now we know that, okay, there is discounting, value, and taker and setter, but also let's discuss in terms of how do you discriminate, right? So for example, if you're buying more on the basis of volume, I might give you a discount, right? In terms of dynamic, in terms of a surge in price, for example, all the airline companies, right? Whichever website you're using, if there is a surge in bookings, or even if you're using Airbnb or if you're using booking.com, whenever there's a high surge or there's a festive season, there's a dynamic pricing, right? And when there's no surge, the pricing is down. So that's called nothing but a dynamic pricing. eBay would be an example for auctioning, right? And there are other websites as well, which primarily bases their price on auctioning, right? Multiple products, right? You might say that, okay, if you buy one product, I'm going to give you for $10, right? But if you buy 5 products, I'm going to give you all at a rate of $3. So that's nothing but bundling, okay? The razor and bundling as the razor and blade is actually a very it speaks less about the strategy but more about an industry, where you're saying that, okay, I will sell the razor cheap, okay, but I know that the person will keep on coming for the blade for recurring purchases, right? So we will make lesser margins here, right, but we will make higher margins here. So that's nothing but as called as a razor blade strategy, which if you look clearly, if you look a little closely, iPhone actually would be using the same strategy. Because if you see in their segments of revenue, after phone purchase itself, The next is service, right? And if you're an iPhone user, you know the storage is pretty expensive, and everything, every app, although it's very, the apps are well protected compared to an Android, but at the same time, it's pricey, right? So everything in iPhone is expensive once you are doing a recurring purchase, and that's nothing but the razor and blade strategy. Option pricing is when you decide on what features of this product do I want to take, or if I don't want to take this feature, I get lesser price. If I'm taking multiple features, then I get more pricing, right? That could also be true in case of when you're buying automobiles, where you have various kinds and variants, right? So you might have a ZDI, you might have a VDI. So that's nothing but option pricing. Okay, let's look at growth. Now, when you're looking at this would be more to do with the recent e-commerce businesses, and if you're trying to penetrate and you want to get some users on your website, in your platform, you would use penetration strategy, because these e-commerce websites work on volume, and if you don't have visitors on your website, the business is really not going to work. So you can guard your price as much as possible, but if people are not going to visit your store, it's not really going to work out, right? So the likes of Amazon, Udemy, many others are platform-based strategy which use penetration strategy. Freemium, on the other hand, is saying that, okay, this base product is free, okay, but anything else that you buy is payable, okay, and not really used a lot in education businesses, as well as a lot of applications as well. If you if you're streamed through a lot of apps which might appear free at the start, but you will see that the basic feature is free, but everything else that you use, right? I think you will relate a lot with dating apps, wherein going left and right is free, but beyond that, sending likes is payable, right? So that's nothing but the freemium model. Okay, hidden is when one set of users, okay, for them it's free, okay, because they are the traffic. You need these people in your platform, but some other kind of user, so this might be another customer segment which pays for it. Okay, for example, if you look at any of these job websites, for example, Naukri.com, okay, if you are from India, you will read this very fast, and if you have any such websites, you will realize that job website, generally the user is obviously free, because if there's no user, there's no hirer as well. So the user is free, but for the employer it is payable, right? For running an ad, it's payable. For downloading one database of likable employees that I would like to hire is payable, right? Then also you can differentiate the pricing strategy basis ownership. That means, do you actually own this product forever? Right? So for example, Netflix is an example of subscription, and in fact a lot of applications out there in the market function on the basis of subscription. It's actually a very good model, in fact, because recurring revenue is pretty guaranteed, right? Instead of making an effort to sell this product all at once, subscription model might be a much easier thing to sell, right? Fractionalization or co-ownership is nothing but you buy let's say you want an office and you don't really want to buy the entire thing, so you just want a fraction of the office. So co-working space would be an example. There's one more example in leasing. For example, a Zoom car in India, or you might have a lot of these facilities in other countries as well, where you can just rent a car and just go. So you're not basically, you're not buying the car, but you're using it, you're paying the rent, and all the other maintenance related activities are the responsibility of the lessor. Also, a big example in the leasing would also be in case of planes, aircrafts. For a lot of aviation companies, everything is leased, nothing is bought, right? And finally, in terms of ownership, although I don't really agree the pricing strategy in terms of franchising, because franchising is more of a business structure, the channel strategy, rather than pricing strategy. But nevertheless, I'll just explain what is franchising. So there's a product company. Let's take an example like Domino's, right? So that's the product company. Now that product company obviously will have so many companies. You might have company A, company B, company C, company D, and they all are given the product. Now, in return, what's going to happen is they're going to get a 30% share and the 70% is going to go to the parent companies. That's nothing but franchising. It's pretty popular whenever we are talking in terms of brick and mortar business. Franchising is pretty common. Although whether it's successful or not is a separate question. And the survivability is also a question. It has been proven wrong. They've been successful in cases of McDonald's and a lot of other businesses, KFC for that matter, has also been successful. Right? But anyways, that does not really technically fall under pricing strategies. Nevertheless, the CFA curriculum has put inside, so we will honor that. Let's look at the final reading before we move and meet again in the next part of the session is the value proposition. Now, value proposition is a combination of everything that we just discussed into final what do we really want to give, right? So if you combine product, price, channel, etc., everything together, then you are saying this is my value proposition, right? You're saying you will talk about the product, you will talk about the service and support that differentiate you. You will have the sales process. How does the sale happen? Does it happen directly on their website, or does it happen through a bot? Does it happen through a live channel? Does it happen through a physical inspection, right? And the price related to the customers. How are you, in the entire scheme of things? How competitive are you, right? So I will end this lesson in the value proposition, and we'll take up of the next lesson. We'll speak about value chain analysis, because this lesson is already extended, so I don't want to really bore you beyond level. So I'll meet you in the next part of the session. Bye-bye.